today's Explainer. We've got a really fascinating psychological mystery to unpack today about our spending habits, but I promise it's not the usual stuff you hear. We're going to track down a massive, invisible force that is quietly dictating what we toss into our shopping carts, how much debt we're willing to swallow, and why we suddenly crave things we really don't need. If you ever stared at your credit card statement and thought, what on earth possessed me to buy that? Well, you are in exactly the right place. Seriously, think back to a recent time when you felt this intense, almost anxious urge to just buy a luxury item. Maybe it was the absolute newest smartphone, a ridiculously expensive designer jacket, or maybe upgrading to a premium car that definitely stretched your budget a bit too thin. You absolutely did not need it, right? But the urge to own it felt incredibly powerful. So why does that happen? Is it just a lack of self-discipline? Are the marketing campaigns really just that good? Or is there actually something deeper, rewiring our brains when we walk through a mall or scroll online? Well, according to some incredible research by behavioral scientists, the prime suspect behind this urge isn't your lack of personal self-control at all. Actually, the answer might be hiding out in the broader economy around you. Specifically, it's tied directly to the wealth gap, the level of economic inequality in your society, or literally just the level of inequality you think exists, is secretly acting as a massive trigger for your personal spending. Okay, let's dive right into section 1, the urge to splurge. To really dig into this, the lead detectives for our explainer today, researchers Valandia Morales, Rodriguez Bailon, and Martinez, wanted to prove that the widening gap between the rich and the poor doesn't just cause societal tension, it fundamentally changes how we shop. In their study, they zeroed in on what they call positional goods, basically stuff that screams high social status to anyone looking. In one experiment, they told participants, hey, imagine you've got 5,000 euros in the bank, and then asked how much they drop on things like a luxury car, the newest phone, a high-end watch, a really expensive vacation, or a super pricey dinner out with friends. Because, let's be real, these aren't just random errands. They are highly visible signals of success. They're exactly the things we splurge on when we want to show the world, hey, I'm doing great. Which brings us to section 2. Inequality breeds status anxiety. So, what the researchers discovered is that the main driver of all this splurging isn't actually how much absolute cash you have in the bank. Instead, it's all about the perceived gap between the rich and the poor in your area. When you see that wealth gap widening, the environment just feels way more competitive, and that breeds what researchers call status anxiety. Now, what is that? It's basically a constant nagging concern about where you rank in the social hierarchy, totally driven by the fear of falling behind. And here is the real kicker. This anxiety isn't just felt by people at the bottom trying to climb up. Oh no, it's heavily felt by people at the very top who are terrified of losing their spot. When you perceive a massive wealth gap, you subconsciously get a huge spike in this exact kind of stress. And this brilliantly maps out a direct psychological pipeline from macro-level economics straight to your wallet. Step 1, you perceive high economic inequality around you. Step 2, that triggers status anxiety. You start sweating about your rank. Step 3, to fix that bad feeling, you start status seeking. You actively hunt for ways to boost your social standing. And boom, step 4, status consumption. You buy the expensive watch or the fancy car because those items act like a soothing balm for your anxiety. You are literally shopping to secure your place in the social pecking order. Alright, let's look at section 3, testing the theory. Theories are great and all, but how do we know this actually happens in the real world? Well, the researchers built these incredibly clever simulations to tweak how much inequality people thought was around them, and then just watch their spending habits shift in real time. Let's look at their first study, which we'll call the Andalusia investigation. They got over 250 participants and had them read totally fabricated news articles about wealth distribution in the Spanish region of Andalusia. Half of them read news saying inequality was off the charts, while the other half read that wealth was distributed pretty fairly. The result? No way around it. The folks who just read the fake news about high inequality suddenly reported way higher desires for status goods, a lot more materialism, and way more status anxiety. Literally, just the thought of living in an unequal society was enough to trigger that urge to splurge. But, you know, scientists love to be absolutely sure. So they took it a step further with study 2, using what they call the Bimbalula paradigm. This is wild. They dropped over 300 participants into a completely made-up society called Bimbula. By using a totally fake world, they wiped out all real-world biases. In Bimbula, there are 3 very strict income tiers, high, middle, and low. They told every single participant, you are in the middle income group. But here's the trick. They messed with the gap between those groups. The crucial part was the income gap. In the high inequality version of Bimbula, the rich were raking in 13,500 Bimbulian coins a month, while the poor were scraping by on just 500. That is a massive, visually striking disparity. In the low inequality version, the gap was tiny. Now remember, all participants were safely in the middle class either way, but the ones who were placed in the extreme inequality version showed a massive spike in their drive to seek status and buy luxury products. Just the mere existence of extreme disparity around them totally changed their behavior. Let's move to Section 4, Status versus Conspicuous Consumption. Okay, so let's get a deeper understanding of the mechanics here, because it turns out not all luxury shopping is the same. In consumer psychology, there's a really careful distinction between two terms that people usually mix up: status consumption and conspicuous consumption. Status consumption is all about internal motivation. It's buying a luxury item because it represents high class to you. It aligns with how you see yourself, and it boosts your own self-esteem. You buy the expensive watch because wearing it makes you personally feel successful. Conspicuous consumption, though, that's entirely external. That is buying something literally just to flaunt it and get social approval. You're buying the watch strictly to make sure other people see it and know you've got money. And here is the missing link the researchers pulled out of that Bimbula experiment: status seeking. They proved that high inequality acts like a catalyst, throwing gasoline on our overall drive to seek status. Once that status-seeking drive is fired up by inequality, it fuels both types of consumption. Whether you're buying it to feel good inside or buying it to show off outside, the root cause pushing you to the checkout counter is the unequal environment you perceive around you. Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, the materialism trap. So we've looked at the micro level, why you or I might grab that fancy phone. But what happens when an entire society works this way? When millions of people are subconsciously being played by a widening wealth gap? Zooming out reveals some seriously dangerous real-world outcomes. When perceived inequality is high, it actively breeds materialism across the board. People start treating luxury goods almost like magic, believing a designer label will literally buy them security and happiness. That leads straight to higher status consumption. But honestly, the most dangerous part, the data shows inequality actually tricks us into loving debt. Participants in highly unequal scenarios developed highly favorable attitudes toward going into debt. They thought it was a fantastic idea to finance luxury stuff they couldn't actually afford, which, big surprise, completely tanked their saving behaviors. Basically, inequality pressures us to mortgage our future just to signal our status right now. So, the next time you find yourself craving a luxury brand or feeling that sudden, burning urge to splurge on something you definitely don't need, take a pause. Just ask yourself, are you truly buying this for you, or is the anxiety of an unequal society simply doing the shopping for you? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.